Hello and welcome to the MobiCast. Today we're lucky to have Bob Bentz joining us. I met Bob last month at the Location Leadership Forum, the MMA event. We sat down to lunch together and we had a great conversation down at lunch, and later found out that he is the author of Relevance Raises Response: How to Engage and Acquire with Mobile Marketing. It's a 354-page book. It's available at relevanceraisesresponse.com or at Amazon. He's also the proprietor and founder of Purplegator, which is one of the companies under the ATS umbrella. It's a mobile-first digital agency located in Philadelphia. He's also an adjunct professor at the University of Denver, where he teaches an online graduate-level course in mobile marketing. Welcome to the MobiCast, Bob. How you doing?
Doing great, thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone ever said about me.
Nice. Well, no problem. It was I really enjoyed our conversation, and I was eager to learn more about Purplegator. And when I found out you've written this book, it's funny. Relevance Raises Response. At Go2Mobi, we've been trying to pioneer the concept of moment-based mobile marketing. And as I have been since meeting you, basically, whenever I'm selling concepts internally or selling them externally, I end up finding myself saying relevance raises response.
It's catchy, isn't it?
It's catchy and it's simple and it gets right to the point. It's something that I've experienced sort of throughout my career as well. I used to run a mobile marketing. A desktop marketing campaign for an online jewelry auction company called bids.com, and I kind of did all of their creative, ran their entire sort of mobile marketing or desktop marketing campaign, and it was a principle that I learned very quickly, is just to build relevance. In this case, it was seasonal relevance, so I just basically make the ads reflect the season that I was advertising in, and it raised responses sort of astronomically, and little things like that, just having advertising reflect the moment is something that I think is very powerful, which we'll get into in a little bit. So why don't you take the floor a little bit and tell us about your book and about your background, what's brought you here?
Yeah, well, Advanced Telecom Services began in 1989. It expanded to numerous countries, including headquarters in Philadelphia, also offices in Canada, in Toronto, in London, England, in Prague, Czech Republic, and also in Taipei, Taiwan. So we've gone international over the 27 years. One of the interesting things about the business is over 27 years, we've kind of provided services to the same type of customers, that being media, advertisers, and advertising agencies. But imagine what has changed in those 27 years. In 1989, when we started, there were only 3 million mobile phones in the country. So we've kind of evolved from being an interactive telephone company originally for landlines. And then in the mid-90s, this thing called the Internet came along. So we kind of morphed into becoming an Internet company. And I keep saying that Internet thing's going to catch on one of these days.
Just like mobile, maybe one time.
And then finally, in 2002, I like to tell the story. I was over in our London office, and I noticed that at the time, of course, Europe was about 3 years ahead of North America in terms of mobile. And I noticed when people's phones rang, they got a unique ringtone, which at that time, many of them were Spice Girl tunes. And so I learned about the phenomena of ringtones, and I brought that concept back to the United States and Canada. In 2002, we started one of the first ever membership ringtone sites, and we built that up to 60,000 members paying $10 a month for 10 ringtones and 5 wallpapers. We ended up selling that in 2006 to the Zim Corporation of Ottawa, and that was a nice run that we had there with ringtones.
I'm doing a little math on that. It sounds like you did okay.
Yeah, we did really well in that business, and I think we sold it at the right time, too.
Yeah.
Because then ringtones started to appear on the deck, and it was less important to go to the web to get them. Mm-hmm. But in 2006, we were sitting here with some technology that we were pretty good at delivering stuff to the mobile phone, and we started to get into mobile marketing as an agency. We did some services. Quite frankly, they didn't do that great until about 2010 or 2011, when the smartphone penetration reached a significant amount, and then we started to get some real solid results for our customers.
Very cool. So Purplegator is your agency. First of all, what is a Purplegator?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I've had that domain for many, many years. Over 10 years, I've had the domain. And originally, Purplegator was going to be the name of one of our ringtone sites. And we never really created that third ringtone site. So I've sitting on this domain for a long time. I thought it was a catchy name, and we decided to go with it when we renamed the agency.
Nice. I guess I'm trying to remember the book. There's another. I think it's the Purple Cow. This is going to be a terrible analogy because I don't remember it. But back to ringtones for a second. You mentioned Purplegator as a ringtone name. When I was starting my career in affiliate marketing, we spun out a couple different ringtone sites that were probably backed out by some of your products or products that were maybe from Zim who bought your company. And we had a Grubby Monkey. That was one of our ringtone properties. And I shortly for a period I was also the #1 purveyor of ringtones in the Netherlands. Because I started a ringtone hit parade website where I was keeping track of what was top of the charts and reporting it via by their ringtone version of these Billboard hits, and yeah, I sold a lot of ringtones in the Netherlands. So it's interesting. This business in a lot of ways is based on some of that stuff from the early 2000s and before, like ringtones.
Yeah, it really is. It's funny how it starts with some sort of quirky thing like ringtones and evolves into a real bona fide industry that really helps people.
Yeah. So you say in your book, which I have read, that the mobile channel is the best marketing channel of all time. Better than smoke signals? What makes you say this?
Yeah, I think it's better than smoke signals. I actually come from the television industry, and I left that industry in the late 1980s to start this company. And if you think back to the 1980s, television was an absolute juggernaut. If you advertised on television, there were really only 3 major networks in the United States, and there was this upstart called Fox, which had absolutely the worst programming you could ever imagine. And then there was, ESPN, there was MTV, actually, when they went and actually played music videos back then, and ESPN, which seemed to have women's volleyball all day. So there really wasn't a lot of competition. But mobile, I think, does something so much better than television can do, and that's targeting. And I always think of the example of, if I'm watching a TV show and they advertise a feminine hygiene product, well, I'm not a good prospect for buying that product, Whereas with mobile, you can advertise that product and just get to those people that might be interested in that particular product. So that's why I think that it's the best marketing channel of all time, because it's incredibly able to target your best customer when they're most likely to buy.
And is that really just because it's such a personal device that everyone sort of has their own, and therefore the signals that come from the mobile allow you to help discern the gender, the life stage, all the various demographics?
Well, I think that's a big part of it, but I like to say that there should be absolutely no waste when it comes to mobile. For instance, if you were a restaurant owner in Mississauga, your trading radius might only be 3 to 5 miles from your store. So buying traditional media over, the metro of Toronto just doesn't make sense, because most of it's going to be wasted. And when you add that to the demo and the interest capabilities that are available on mobile, that's where I think it's just the perfect storm for advertising effectiveness.
Yeah, and the other piece, of course, to that is the location aspect, where each of these devices, every time it sees an ad, and if you're an app owner, maybe it provides persistent location data that can give you a lot of different insight into how people behave, what they might be interested in, and kind of importantly also what they have the opportunity to do. You don't want to advertise something to someone who's over 100 kilometers away or 100 miles away from being able to go in and actually act on that purchase.
Absolutely. I think geo-targeting is mobile's single biggest strength.
Nice. So what are some ways that sort of, with Purplegator, it started, I guess you've been mobile, you've been telephonic or mobile basically your whole career. So starting Purplegator as a mobile first agency, is it mobile first or is it actually mobile only?
It's mobile first. About 85% of what we do is mobile oriented. People come here because of mobile.
Nice. So has that been difficult at all? Or you say, I guess people come for the mobile aspect. Has it? I guess it's probably a lot less difficult now, but especially in those early days, was it difficult sort of selling that being that real pioneer in mobile when everyone was still just thinking about the desktop?
Yeah, it definitely was. When I look back at our proposals that we were doing in that 2006 to 2011 period, we were putting a lot of stats in there because we had to convince people just how big it was, especially if, the boss or the owner of the business was, a bit older than some of his staff. So we don't even have to put stats in our presentations anymore. People get it. They bought in. They're with the program. So, yeah, that's not something we really bother with anymore.
Even when I started this podcast, I think I would reference a lot of the a bit of the disparity between digital budgets and mobile budgets and time spent in these two mediums, and there was still a big discrepancy between the spend. So you'd see a lot more on desktop, even though people are spending much more time on mobile. But recent statistics that have come out that I've just sort of seen in my inbox every day are sort of disproving that. You're seeing sort of a mass movement into mobile to the point where it is starting to be much more reflective of the actual time spent.
Yeah, I think that's true. The gap is narrowing each year, but I think it still has a long way to go. It's sort of
desktop is more of an addition at this point. It's sort of, okay, there's a few things that I'll do on my desktop outside of work, when I'm at home, but most of the time it's this little device that I just keep staring into, which is quite interesting. So can you give some examples of ways that you've worked with clients to really take advantage of the mobile medium?
Yeah, I always think that when it comes to mobile, it makes the client look cutting edge, it makes them look advanced. We've heard, for instance, some feedback from businesses that there's kind of a tertiary bonus that they get from being mobile, and that's in the recruiting process, that millennials are more attracted to a company. They're attracting better employees because of their mobile involvement. And the other thing I think that's really been a bonus, especially with some of our retail clients, is they're capturing more data, some of which they didn't know previously. And mobile's able to give them that, and some of the third-party data that they're gathering, and they're finding pockets, neighborhoods, which are especially important to their business, and I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, mobile data is obviously, there's whole new levels of dimensions that are available through mobile data. I'm working actually on a startup right now that's based on the lunch buying activity, and the amount of data that you can kind of work with local restaurants on that, when it relates to how people behave in restaurants, especially when you can tie it up with beacons. It's just absolutely amazing. So one of the tricky things with mobile I always find is creative. So often I still see creative where the text is nearly impossible to read, where people aren't really fully understanding the best way to sort of use mobile creative. What's your agency's philosophy on mobile creative?
Yeah, good question. Banner advertising still works to a certain degree. We still have successful programs that just do standard banners, but to stand out from the din of advertising that people are receiving every day on mobile, you usually have to do something different. It's easy to take standard banner images to a different level through things that are offered through social media, like Facebook's carousel ads. We've found increased engagement, tremendously increased engagement when you use 4 different images in the carousel ads as opposed to the one on Facebook. But for our company, and our special sauce, we're banking on mobile video. We hired a guy as our creative director who has Hollywood-level experience, having worked on the Fast and the Furious movies. Guy who graduated in Philly, went to Hollywood, found out it wasn't quite as sexy as he thought it would be, came back to Philly. We're glad to have him. So we're banking a lot on video. We're shooting videos for clients that often use the same content, yet it's parsed into everything from a 2-minute video that they might put on their desktop website to a 6-second Vine video and a 7 to 15-second mobile ad video. And, one of my favorite sayings is that video informs and entertains, and it should be integrated into every aspect of your mobile marketing efforts.
That's interesting. Yeah, you can see those trends very clearly. I just was an old contact of mine was one of my first reps at a company called AdBright way back in the day when I was media buying. He now works for Mopub, and he is now spearheading their video product called Spiral. I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out yet, but it's just a beautifully simple video streaming app where you essentially select the topics you're interested in, then it serves you the freshest ads, the freshest video content on a category by category basis, and they autoplay. They're perfectly high def. They're beautiful, and as soon as you scroll to one, it just starts playing. The previous one stops playing, and it was a really seamless experience, even more so than things like YouTube. And I really think things like that are definitely going to be the future. And so they're going to start monetizing through seamless, ad experiences as well. So having multi different formats and different lengths and things like that for advertisers, I think would be quite important in order to get that message across quickly.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, check out Spiral. I'm always interested watching YouTube ads too at the companies that are really good at getting a hook in those first 5 seconds, no matter how long the video is. And the good ones, you can tell the way that they're set up is to get a hook in right away so that you don't skip. Is that something that you guys are cognizant of when you're making content for your clients?
Absolutely. It has to be, because let's face it, none of us want to see those videos, right? But we have to see them before we get to the video that we want. So if you don't grab their attention right away, you're going to lose them as soon as the minimum seconds expires. And
I'm almost like there every now, sort of as someone who works in advertising, I do find myself, watching videos I might not otherwise but it's almost begrudging, like, okay, you got me, you got that hook in there. But alternately, when you go to NHL.com, for instance, if you go to that was the one I was just browsing recently, where to watch a 30-second highlight package, they lock you into watching a 30-second commercial, and that just doesn't work for me when I can't skip, especially if the content I'm watching is short. I find that not a very good experience, and I'm pretty quick to get out of it.
It's amazing how impatient we've all become. Yeah. 30 seconds, it's not a big deal, right?
Yeah.
We're not willing to invest that.
Well, it's about control in a way, right? You want to be able to control it, and sometimes I'll if I really want to see the content, I will mute the ad, and then I honestly sort of give myself a quiet, like, all right, I won that battle. It's weird how that works with psychology and everything. But cool, that's very cool to hear that you're so engaged in video. We're at Go2Mobi, we're going to be really putting a focus on mobile as well. One of our on video. One of our sister companies is SpotX, which is a really strong video supply partner that we hope to be integrating with soon, and to try to really grow that part of our business. Cool. So, do you have any thoughts on mobile native as a unit?
Well, I think anytime you can make the message more relevant, remember, relevance raises response, right? More people are going to watch it, and I think that's, again, one of the advantages to mobile. I always challenge people to look at their Facebook, and usually in that second position, they're going to see a sponsored ad on their mobile in their news feed, and almost always, people who don't really notice that or aren't in the advertising business say to me, that was pretty well targeted to my interests, Mm-hmm. So, there's an example of native working, very fluently.
Native is sort of almost a different kind of relevance, because it's usually, it can be targeted, and increasingly it is, but it's almost, the relevance is almost derived from the fact that it looks like the content you're reading, even though it may not be always thematically similar or directly targeted to your taste. Although increasingly it is, it gains a little bit of relevance just because it looks like a natural part of the page rather than something that is being added or overlaid over top.
Yep, for sure. And probably, you and I know we're both baseball fans, and if we received an ad, something pertaining to baseball, that would probably fit in really well with the other stuff we're looking at on our mobiles. Exactly.
And perhaps because I have apps pertaining to baseball, and I often visit mobile websites related to baseball, there's advertising companies out there that have built, including Go2Mobi, that have profiles built on my interests.
Absolutely. Relevance raises response.
Relevance raises response. It's my new mantra. So are there any ways that you've leveraged location data with your clients to help them succeed?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always say there's two things that are no-brainers that we start with, regardless of the customer, and especially if they're a retail customer, and that is, retargeting. That should be part of what you do all the time. But the other one is geo-conquesting. And I've found that small local businesses, local lumber yards and things like that, boy, they love the idea of someone being in Home Depot or Lowe's and geo-conquesting people there. We work with a lot of hospitals, and of course hospitals, one of their biggest pain points is they just can't get enough nurses. So in a busy city, we'll geo-conquest the competing hospital so that when that nurse inevitably takes her break during her 10-hour session at work, she might see an ad for the competing hospital where she doesn't have to work the night shift and maybe even gets a $5,000 signing bonus to jump. So that's a great example, I think, of local data, and there's a lot more in local. One of our customers had never advertised paint, and the reason they had never advertised paint was because at different stores within the DMA they offered different types of paint, so they never wanted to put that on television or in print because someone might come to the store and they don't have that particular paint there, so they could never use their co-op. Well, mobile was perfect for them because we could serve the ads of the different paint suppliers in a 5-mile radius from that particular store. So suddenly they had a way to advertise paint. So there's a cool example of local as well. And we always try and wrap up our promotions, with heat maps. And we found that to be valuable for our customers, too, because they can identify customer clusters, specific neighborhoods that they should be targeting. And probably when it comes to location, one of my very favorite promotions we've done was for a off-the-strip hotel in Las Vegas. And they wanted to target people that commuted from Los Angeles and Southern California. And I guess if you lived in Southern California, on a whim on a Friday, you might be at work and with your buddy and say, hey, let's go to Vegas for the weekend, right? Well, those people go there without any hotel reservations. So a really cool thing that we did for them was use the Waze app and actually had ads there. So when they were on that Route 5 corridor through the desert, inevitably you're going to be looking at your phone if you're the passenger, hopefully not the driver.
Never.
And the Waze app would direct them right to the hotel. Very successful program we were able to do that was very location-based and targeting those people that we knew were on the highway en route to Vegas.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We at Go2Mobi has a similar product that we offer where we're able to, just because we have such sort of comprehensive map of devices that we're serving ads to, that we're able to tell when devices are outside of their 100-mile home radius, and so we're able to then target people who are traveling with travel-related hotel or tourist-related opportunities. So it's definitely and it is just sort of beginning this ability to serve hyper targeted, relevant, dynamic, creative. That's another thing that we're doing. You had mentioned that you had mixed up creative based on specific radiuses, so that you made sure that you're advertising to the relevant store. And I imagine you probably did that with static creative by just saying, okay, this like creative routing, more or less, where this part of the campaign receives this creative and this part of the campaign receives this creative. We're doing a lot of experimenting right now with individual rich media ad units that have data feeds sort of piped into them that allow us to change them based on various factors on the fly, which is that something you've ever experimented with?
Yeah, it is. We have a really cool customer in New York City called The Ride. And The Ride is a bus that you sit in sideways, and one side of the bus is all glass. So it's a big tourist attraction, but it's also pretty cool if you're a New York resident to do it once or twice. So with that, what we found was there was a different message that was working for New York residents versus tourists. And of course, with a tourist, you needed to have more immediacy. because they probably weren't there that long, and you couldn't do any branding. You either got them now or you didn't get them later. As opposed to a New York City resident, which might plan ahead to do this kind of thing. So there we served different ads to people that we knew were New York City residents versus people that we knew that happened to just be in town for business or pleasure. We also had a day and a night creative, because during the day they could there was more immediacy required because they could book and go in an hour or two. And at night, it was more, branding that hopefully they'll consider, going the next day. So there's a different level of direct response that was required for that customer, a different sense of urgency that was required. The other thing that we do is, with the geo-conquesting for retail, we serve different creative based on what competing store that consumer is in. So, that's another example that I can think of where we use dynamic creative.
Nice. Now, one of the most challenging things in modern digital marketing is attribution, is the problem of direct attribution. And it's sort of interesting because we live in this era where everyone sort of feels like it should be possible. You should be able to ensure that someone who sees an ad, that you could actually follow that through all the way to a purchase or to a store visit. But it's fraught with all sorts of issues. Is that something your customers come to you with at this point? That ability to have a direct understanding of the ROI on their ad spend? And how do you either accomplish it or approximate it?
Yeah, I wish there was a perfect solution for that. And I haven't seen one yet. There's different things that we do. My legacy business, when I talked back in 1989, is, IVR, interactive landline-based telephone. So, some of the things that we can do, which are pretty obvious, having a different phone number where people would dial in so you can track the results and that kind of thing. But yeah, I haven't seen a perfect solution in that regard in terms of people that actually walk in the store. You want to talk all the time about lift. But the interesting thing to me is always how people come to us, advertisers come to us with that expectation that we're going to be able to give them these detailed reports in terms of the lift that they got in their store. And I always turn that around and say, that billboard that you bought, how do you determine how many people came in because of that? And so whatever we're doing it better than traditional media in most cases.
Yeah, what's the quote about 50% of my ad spend? I just don't know which half is the bad half. Right. Maybe we're at 60. Maybe we're at. I think he was overstating it at the time. It was probably more like 10% then, and maybe we're at 60 now. Because it is, it's there are ways to approximate it. We just announced a partnership with Placed, who has a pretty interesting product as it relates to being able to tell when users have visited their store with their sort of persistent location panel. But it's still an approximation of it. It's not, we're not at Minority Report yet, and maybe thankfully so, just yet. But I'm sure we're on the way. So one of the things that I got to just actually now, as I was just before this interview, I was reading the final few chapters of your book, and you actually mention micro moments in it, which is a concept that Google brought forward, and it's one that Go2Mobi for the past year or so has been really executing against to try to sort of break down a consumer's sort of mobile life map as we see it into various addressable moments. So one of the neat things we're doing is we're creating large databases on consumer relative location or consumer specific location. So it's not just various points of interest, it's actually points of interest as they relate to that consumer. So we're able to sort of anonymously detect when a user's at home or perhaps at work or commuting. Have you been able to, are mobile moments something that Purplegator thinks about, and have you ever been able to execute campaigns with those in mind?
Yeah, it definitely is, and we used we already discussed baseball here once, so let's do it a second time. Okay. Last year we worked with Franklin, the batting glove company, and they actually added a tag to their batting gloves that were placed in sporting goods stores and department stores. And this created, I thought, a really cool mobile moment. Of course, if you're a baseball fan and you see this tag hanging, it was going to catch your attention because, of course, most batting gloves are bought by youth players, not adult players. And what Franklin did was they offered a batting clinic and they had a tag on the batting gloves, and you had a chance for your local youth team to participate in a batting clinic at a Major League Baseball stadium, and it was going to be taught. Your coach was going to be Major League players that use Franklin batting gloves, and guys that use Franklin batting gloves are Dustin Pedroia, Josh Hamilton, Joey Votto, Miguel Cabrera, some really big names in baseball, and some phenomenal hitters. So the hitting would be held at an MLB ballpark for your youth team. And what the consumer had to do when they were looking at the baseball gloves is they had to send a text message to enter into the contest or scan a QR code. And yeah, I know QR codes are a little old-fashioned, but they still add a little bit to what you're doing in text. And there was a link on the Franklin website once you scan the QR code, if you tap through to the website, that allowed the parent to choose the size batting glove that you needed. Also gave a video of some hitting tips for the player, and based on the size of the player and their level of play, it recommended a particular style of batting gloves. But most important, what Franklin got out of this was a very valuable database indeed of people that they knew were youth baseball players or parents of youth baseball players that were interested in purchasing their batting gloves. And not to mention, just a phenomenal promotion that, probably had a lot of smiling faces at those MLB parks.
Yeah, that's a great example. And batting gloves are a depleting commodity. And after a good season of baseball, you should probably have a hole in your batting glove.
Yeah, if you hit the ball at all.
If you hit the ball at all, then it's probably time for a new batting glove. So now I wonder if they ever were able to tie. I guess they could. I guess anyone who wins one of those competitions or enters would use their email, so they'd be able to build their list in that way. We're always trying to tie things to device ID, right? That's our big goal, is to have this sort of this massive device ID map that has attributes and characteristics all built into it, so we can target better in the future. But it's definitely a data heavy enterprise. Yeah, the server cost can be astronomical, which is a challenge. I just had a question too about so as you'd mentioned you have clients in New York City, you've got clients sort of all over the eastern seaboard. Are your clients international? Are they across the U.S.? Where does Purplegator's sort of clients come in, and how do you market yourself as an agency?
Yeah, well, this office takes care of the United States and Canada. And one of the novel things that we've done, which I think was pretty brilliant, was when it comes to our short code, we reserve the same short code, 84444, in both the United States and Canada. And we have a couple of border radio stations, for instance, that might be in upstate Vermont, but the majority of their listeners are English-speaking residents of Montreal. Working some of those radio stations that might be in Windsor and Detroit, or in your city in Vancouver and Seattle, where they cross over. So we do quite a bit in both the United States and Canada. Our London office handles the UK and Ireland, and our Czech office handles Czech Republic and Slovakia.
Truly international business you've built here. Very cool. All right. Well, I think that does it for my questions today. That our time is almost up here. Want to give another plug for your book. So anyone who's interested in brushing up in sort of a comprehensive look at that mobile marketing, go to relevanceRaisesResponse.com. Maybe you can take it as your new mantra as you pitch mobile services to clients. It makes a ton of sense. So, Bob, again, thanks for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a lot of fun.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.